me name's Sonny. Welcome back to another VR video. Today we are in Vail VR. So, yes, this is actually just a little gameplay video. It's not necessarily a gameplay video. I got a key for this game. Someone handed me a key. They had an extra key. The game is actually free, but it's currently in very early stage. I believe it's in beta or something. So it's kind of, you have to request access, right? So it might take you a little while to get in, but currently it is free. So have a look at the little information here and have a look at the game. But what I wanted to do, it's a multiplayer online game, but did I just say online? Like, there's absolutely no reason for me to say online, is there? I'm from such an old era of gaming. It's a multiplayer game, first-person shooter, as you can see, grenades and stuff, the usual business, really pretty cool stuff. And I wanted to go a little bit through the mechanics, because it's an early game. I kind of want to go through a bit of the mechanics and say, certain things that I might find that I would suggest improving over time, just elements that you can improve and stuff like that. Right now, it's pretty good. Like, it's all the basic stuff. You've got a full body avatar. You've got hand tracking and good animation going on the avatar. Grip points on your holster, gun grabs, multi grabs, two-hand grabs, and the same for single small guns as well. Pretty good aiming on things as well. And the usual business, right? So all pretty good stuff. You've got proper reloading as well. So you can actually grab manual reloading and the usual business, proper stuff. So let's have a look at a bit at the mechanics that I really want to sort of address a little bit, because I think over time you can always improve things, especially if you look at some of the details that you probably want to look into. The first thing that I want to talk about is just very quickly is the mover, the character control and system and the movement system. So here we go, actual locomotion stuff. It's all the usual locomotion system, analog stick rotation, not rotation but movement. There are options for locomotion and stuff like that. There's quite a lot of options actually in terms of switching on and off the virtual crouch, which controller you're using for primary hand, your left hand, right hand. You also have toggling for grips. So toggle grips, here we go, I've clicked it and then I've clicked it again to release. So yeah, toggle grip, all of that usual stuff. You also have rotation systems and smooth rotating. You can do snap rotate and stuff like that. So here we go. You've got snap rotate, all works pretty well, right? Pretty good, all good stuff. But let's have a look at the character controller here. I want to talk a little bit about this. Well, not really a little bit, it's just a quick one. So the locomotion system here, I believe, is running a sort of physics rigid body, right? So we've got an actual simulated physics rigid body, which is doing all the locomotion and colliding with things, the usual stuff. I think there's a tiny issue with that, which is a very minuscule lag problem, which is due to the fact that it's accelerating, right? And I can tell that it's a full physics object because when I hit something like this corner here, I actually bounce off of it. Boink! You can just about see, boink! There we go. I'm bouncing off of it, right? So just bouncing off. That means I'm colliding, I'm sliding along, and then returning back. So it's not like I'm sliding along in terms of movement, it's because I've actually got a force going on. So this is definitely a physics rigid body that is being moved around. And that leads to the fact that it requires acceleration to reach the actual movement system, right? To the target movement speed on your analog stick. And you can see that creates a tiny bit of lag. I think what you probably want to do, since the character controller doesn't really collide with anything in the world, right? So, well, it collides with static objects, of course. But let's say this gun here is a physics object. The character controller doesn't collide with that, right? So you might as well, nothing like with force is going to collide with the player. You may as well turn the forces up on the player so that they're very high, right? And that means that you will have an immediate acceleration to your target speed. You won't have this lag of acceleration where you kind of have to go up to max speed, right? So that's just one of those suggestions. I think have a look at that, probably be able to speed things up. Because for someone like me who has no problem with locomotion sickness, let me get the words right. Locomotion sickness in VR, that's fine. But for other players, maybe, you know, locomotion sickness can get obvious when you're dealing with small, less significant accelerations, right? It's very small, it's a very quick acceleration, but it's still very obvious when you're actually in the world, right? Especially when you're switching direction, that sort of acceleration is very heavy. You can very much feel it. It almost feels like I've got the loco ball going on. So there we go, that's locomotion. That's one of those things that I would suggest sort of looking at. Another thing I noticed actually is that while the character controller doesn't have collision with physics objects, the head does have actually a collider on there. So actually you can't collide with things that you're holding. However, I'm still in. Wait a minute. Continuous toggle. Hold. Why does it do that? Right, there we go. Yeah, it's still in toggle mode. Ridiculous. Hey? But it's switched. Okay, now it's back to normal. Okay, you need to fix the switch mode here. These buttons aren't working correctly. I clicked on toggle and it switched to toggle. I clicked on hold, it stayed on toggle. I clicked on toggle, it switched to hold. You need to look into that. That's a glitch right there in your menu system. But that's beside the point, right? So here we go. You can just usual physics object. Now once you've picked an object up, it becomes a collidable object, right? So it's actually, these are static right now, even though they're physics objects. They are static. They won't be pushed around. But once they are, like, here we go, static objects, right? They won't be pushed around. But once they've been picked up, then they're now physics objects, right? So there we go. They're now active and physics and very springy. But there we go. Now, what I noticed is actually the head does have collision. So there we go. Able to push things around with your head. So you can probably headbutt. There we go. Yep. Collision on the head. So there we go. That's just something that I noticed. A little bit of cool thing going on there. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe things that get thrown at you, it kind of bounces off your head. I believe that's intentional. That's just a little trait that I noticed, right? Now, guns. Let's have a little talk about grabbing and stuff like that. Oh, before I do that, actually. Oh, come on. We're on toggle grabs again. I don't get it. What's up with your options, dudes? Hold on, let's have a look here. Where is it? Did I miss it? Right, hold on. Where is it? Right. Okay, so that's working. That's not working. That's on. I'm restarting the game. Okay, we're back in. So let's see if the toggle grabs are switched off. They are. Yeah, good. It's working properly now. So yeah, maybe you need to look at that option. It's definitely not working properly. Right. So here we go. Grabs. Before I do grabs, I wanted to look at the avatar a little bit. One thing that I'm really not keen on, and I think this is definitely a problem, is, and you should be able to see the body, when you crouch, the body rotates to the left, right? And I assume that's because your animation was supposed to do this, right? Okay, fair enough, but really it feels very awkward, right? Because this is supposed to represent my body, right? The player's body. So when crouching, they're really gonna crouch in reality, like normally. So maybe that's not the best animation to go with. I think just go with a straightforward crouch. It's up to you, of course. It's purely design work, that, but to me, I just feel like that's a bit of an unusual one to go with, right? It immediately puts you out of the idea that this is your body. It immediately says it's turning without any logical reason to turn, right? Because no one's going to crouch and turn their body to the right that much. Like, it just doesn't. It's not. Also, if you're like me and you kind of crouch with your back to the right, then it's even worse, right? It kind of tilts to the left while I'm turning to the right in reality. So maybe just go with the center. it perfectly and accurately tracks the head tracking, which again, you actually have the heads up display here is actually rotating based on the head and the hands. So maybe use a little bit of that, and then you get a little bit of a blend where the body is kind of rotating with the hands, because what happens otherwise is you get things like this. So if you look at my arm here, as I turn my head, it's clearly pulling the shoulder away, right? Where what you really want is the shoulders should be logically positioned so that the arms are both in sort of optimal position, right? That's what you would do in reality. But instead, as I turn my head, this section of the arm is getting pulled out of position, right? Because the whole body is rotating. So look at that, maybe have a little bit of a blend. You've already got some calculations doing the blend for things like the heads-up display there. So maybe use a bit of that, and it would be a really cool addition to the body. I understand that the holster points are probably going to be rotated a little bit as a result, so maybe separate that. I don't know if they're directly attached to the body. It doesn't look like they are, so that would be fine, right? So very much, I mentioned this in my little Hitman 3 video. When it comes to holster, make sure it's attached based on tracking, right? You don't want any sort of avatar stuff pushing the holster points around, unless that avatar is logically based on your tracking, which, as you can see here, it's not based on my tracking, right? It's based on the in-game logic. So that's fine, right? You've got the holster separated. But having said that, when I crouch in reality, here's my hip in reality. When I crouch in reality, I do move it back a little bit, right? So maybe have the holster points move a little bit back, only a little bit, not as excessively as you might do the animation. I don't know, that's entirely up to you as developers, designers, whoever, whatever, right? Really cool. Now, the amount of times I just tried to grab that. Let's talk a little bit about grab points, because I think this is a really important one to look into, right? The actual grab, the tracking point here, I don't know whether we can see this here, but I'm going to try and load up my thingy here. So you can see here, this is the Oculus tracking, and the Oculus tracking should be pretty much exactly where the controller really is in reality. If I was to place the controller on the table, I might be able to get it to show just the controllers. And don't move. Is it going to show the controllers? Is it going to show the controllers? It is not going to show the controllers today. Oh well. Yeah, but I think if I don't move them at all, they will, but they're right next to the fan as well, so maybe not so useful. But that's where the tracking should be, right? So there's not too much of an offset in terms of the actual tracking hands. They're relatively good. You see how here, if I put my palms together, they do bounce perfectly in the Oculus tracking, but obviously the in-game tracking a little bit off, which is fine. I think it's pretty close, given that there are going to be multiple different devices. I'm running this game through Steam, so you have, a bunch of choices in terms of what devices they might be using, your player might be using, so that makes perfect sense. However, that offset is not consistent, right? So when I we'll go with that. When I pick up a gun, the offset on the hand should remain the same, because in reality, your hand is where your hand is, that might be the dumbest, most logical thing I've ever said, but your hand is where your hand is, right? So it should never really... Wait a minute, what did I pick up? Oh, that gets reloaded, yeah. It should never move out of position just because you're holding something, because now as a result, so here's my wrist here. I'm gonna try and point exactly to it, right? And now when I rotate my wrist, you can see it's rotating massively around that point, right? That's because there's such a large offset, and you can see this offset when I let go. So here we go. You see that offset? That's changing my hand position, which doesn't make any sense. What should happen is the gun should just place itself exactly where my hand is, right? Because that's where my hand is, so the gun should be placed there. Instead, it places up there, right? So here we go. We'll do the positions again. Here's where my palms are, and then when I let go, that's where my palms are, right? So the tracking has now suddenly been offset quite a bit. In fact, if you look at that, and then you pick up another one, this is how far offset they are, right? This is where my palms are touching each other, and then if I were to let go, this is where they are. So that offset is major offset, right? Which is, it gets even worse when you pick up something like this, because here, that offset is massive, right? So here we go. It's a very major offset, right? That's not something that you want to do. I don't know about where this idea, and this is something I've seen in other games as well. It's a really unusual thing to do. I assume that people are trying to position the guns relatively to where they kind of think the gun should be. But really it should be where the hand is supposed to be, and then the gun should be fit and maybe tilted correctly in accordance with that, right? Which is, it's kind of alright, but it's just really unusual that we went with that. It's a very unusual thing, right? I don't know where that came from, but I think I've seen it in other games as well. That's something that you would definitely want to fix, right? You definitely want to look into that. Another thing I want to talk a little bit about in terms of the actual grab hand stuff is just the overall avatar sort of tilting as well. So if we look a little bit at the physics here, what you would expect, so the way an object is held in game, well, not in game, in the real world, is you've got a joint here on your wrist, and that's holding up the whole hand and the object, anything connected to the hand. So this is where the joint actually is. I'm trying not to touch the sensor there. This is where the joint actually is. So if something pushes on the gun, it should tilt with this pivot point here. It should do this, right? It should always kind of rotate. I'm trying to correct it because obviously the wrist point is different to my real wrist. But it should push around on here, which means that's where the pivot should be. Of course, in this game, or in many other games, actually, I've seen it in plenty of games, that's not where the pivot is. You can see that point gets pushed around, right? And that's because it's rotating around a different point. It's actually rotating around this point here. This is the point where things are rotating. It should be pushing this whole gun away at this position. This is where the joint should be. But instead the joint is around here, right? Where that stays, you see how that stays pretty much in the same position as I push the gun around. And this becomes even more obvious, of course, when you've got bigger guns and stuff like that, where it's kind of getting pushed. It's probably getting pushed around here, so it looks a little bit more real, because, there we go, it's getting pushed around at that point, because the center point of the object is probably around here, which is where the center of mass will be in the game's physics system. But it's pushing the elbow around, and really it should be doing this, right? It should be keeping this in position and then doing this, when in reality it's pushing the elbow around instead. So yeah, that's just something that to look into. I don't know how you're doing the physics. I assume it's just a bunch of add forces. It's a very strong spring going on here, so it's a one of those very static, very super strong spring type physics games where you've got your hand here and then it'll immediately recenter to the target position, right? So it's a super strong spring. It's basically a one frame spring. That's all fine. It all looks about right. Although personally, I kind of feel like the recoil should be a little bit stronger on a single hand hold. So there we go. I feel like that should be maybe a lot stronger than that. Maybe instead of having it so damped, a little bit of springiness. So it should be like that, a little bit of bounce, very tiny bounce. But instead you've got the sort of damping there. That's pretty fine. It's not bad. That's purely game design. It's not something that I should really be talking much about. That's not really up to me. But the other thing is where there are glitches. So this is definitely something to look into. I think you should definitely look at this and probably get it fixed as quickly as possible, which is your secondary grab point. In fact, I'm going to use this gun because this gun will show you the other problem as well. The secondary grab point, let's start with it here. So firstly, the secondary grab point is around here, which is fine, right? That makes sense. That works fine. So you've got your primary hand here, and then your secondary hand here, and then if you let go of your secondary hand, your primary hand will carry on holding it, right? If you let go of your primary hand, your secondary hand will carry on holding it, which is all fine. That seems good, except there's a problem. When you let go, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to place my hands like this, right? So both of my hands will be like this. So there we go. Both of my hands are like that, right? They're both pointing outwards towards the front, right? And you can see it obviously rotates the gun so that it is going from one hand to the other, because that's a secondary grab point, and it's mostly rotating towards this position, right? So the rotation doesn't really matter, it's the position that matters, right? So here I'm rotating my hand around, and you can see it tilts the gun, but it actually rolls the gun, but it doesn't tilt it up and down, right? I can't make it up and down like that with my right hand, and with my left hand I can't rotate it at all. Right? It's just purely position. That does nothing. However, I'm pointing both of these hands outwards. So when I let go of my left hand, which is my secondary, it'll correct it, which is fine, right? However, if I let go of my right hand, there's a problem, because it hasn't corrected the rotation. So now, even though my hand is pointing that way, my left hand is pointing straight out in reality, but it's staying like this, which allows me now to rotate the gun in a very, very unusual way. And it actually does this no matter how you rotate it. So now, this is where my hands are, right? You see this? This is where my hands are. And that's a problem, and that's because you're not resetting this grab point to where the hand should be. It's very much based on where the dual grab point was, right? So I had my hand stretched out like this in order to dual hand, and it would aim like that, that's fine. But when I let go, it's not correcting to this point. And now I've got this kind of choppy hand, which is actually, you know, it's an actual physics object here. So there we go. I've got a little choppy hand, and I can actually hit things around from miles away. I can't even reach that hand. But there we go. It does have the ability to actually re-grab things from a distance, right? Because I believe the distance grabbing is not... It's not separate to the regular grabbing, right? So there we go. We've got regular grabbing here, and then distance grabbing like that. It's exactly the same thing, I believe, right? So there we go. Anyways, it's an unusual problem, but that leads to a secondary problem as well. As you can see, the little distance grab that I showed you there. The problem that I have here is if you don't grab it at the secondary point, and you grab it near the secondary point, you will end up grabbing the gun, right? You can switch this off. You can switch off hand swapping in the options, but really it should be a little bit more clever than that in terms of how it handles it, right? So obviously I can pick the gun up like this, which is what that is intended to do, that option. It's supposed to swap your gun, and you can see that it lifts the gun every time. I kind of have to lower it because the offset is always a little bit unusual. But the distance check is not actually caring about the distance to the handle. It's caring about the distance to the gun, which means if I'm not trying to grab the secondary point, if I'm anywhere else, it'll grab the gun, right? And that means even further away, it'll grab the gun. So here we go. Here it'll grab the gun. Here it'll grab the secondary point. Here it'll grab the gun, which is really, really annoying, and I'm sweating like mad right now, so please ignore me itching my nose a little bit. But yeah, that's really annoying, because here you've got, like, you try and secondary hand it like this, and then you go a little bit too far, and it just does that. And that's really, really annoying. And the same thing happens here, right? If I place it here, it'll grab the gun, but if I place it here, nothing, right? So even though this is a lesser distance to this, and there's a secondary grab here, this doesn't do anything, but this grabs the gun. There we go. This grabs the gun, right? And it's actually a rotation relative thing. So if I grab it like this, fine. If I grab it like this, grabs the gun. I don't know, it's a little bit annoying, isn't it, right? There is a third problem, but this is less of a glitch issue, and this is just more of a design problem, right? So this is one thing that I would highly recommend looking a little bit into, but it's not necessary. It's just one of those things that I feel is unusual, and it makes it feel a little bit awkward, right? Single hand, this is where my right hand is. Fair enough, right? So there we go. I'm gonna put it in a circle. Here's my left hand. Do it in a circle. Now, when I two-hand an object, which is a single hand object, a single grab object, right? It places the secondary hand on there. If I let go of my secondary hand, it immediately detaches. Fine. If I let go of my primary hand, it detaches both, right? That, to me personally, I find it a little bit annoying, in my system, I prefer to go with it switches hand when you release your primary, and then that becomes the primary. So you can basically, you can do this, and then it immediately releases and switches to the other hand, right? That's what I prefer, but this is not necessary. It's like other games do it this way as well, where you release your primary and they both drop, right? That's fine. But what I really think should be looked into is the way in which it actually positions the gun. So like I said here, if I move my hands like this, so there we go, my right hand, I'll do a circle, my left hand, I'll do a circle, right? So you can see what I'm doing in reality. Now let me do that while holding the gun. I'm going to position my hands in the same place, so if I was to let go, you'd see immediately where my hand is, right? I'm going to position my hands in the same place. My right hand, I'll do a circle. My left hand, I'll do a circle. And you can see the HUD as well. You can see the HUD there is actually rotating and moving left and right because I'm moving my hands. But you can see that the gun's not moving at all, right? No matter where I place my hand. So here I've got my hand in front of my camera, in front of my view. My hand's over here, and the gun is still perfectly where my right hand is, right? So here we go, you can see this as well, right? That's where my hand was this whole time. So it feels like it's not actually a dual hand. I'm literally dropping my left hand to my side right now, right? So it's down here. In fact, I can even show you that, right? There we go. You can see the highlight coming from my left hand of the things that it can grab, right? So here we go. You can see it highlighting that flashbang. You can see it highlighting that one's the smoke grenade. This one's the flashbang. You can see it highlighting the gun, that gun. You can see it highlighting the suppressed gun here. All perfectly fine, but the right hand can just carry on, aiming. And that means it just feels like my left arm is just a little stretchy rope attached to a gun, right? What maybe you need to do is definitely have a distance limit so that when I'm about here, it should just detach automatically. And secondly, maybe have it a little bit position driven, right? So with your left hand, maybe as I do the circle thing, it should be affecting it very, very slightly, right? So it should have a little bit of influence on the gun, even if your primary hand has most of the influence. I feel that that's pretty necessary, right? It's so am I hitting the right thing? Yeah, I'm just bad at aiming today. It's so necessary, in my opinion, to have that element of fluidity, of influence representing your hands, right? It's a physics-based hand, so obviously it's never going to be in the exact place where your real-world hand is, because it's supposed to be influenced by an in-game physics force. But that doesn't mean that it should be 100% influenced by that force, because my target is here. I'm saying the hand needs to pull to here, so that gun should be pulled very slightly to there, right? And then if it's so far that it should just detach anyway, it should automatically do that. And I assume you were probably going to do that eventually anyway, so definitely something to look at if you weren't, and if you were, then fair enough, that's brilliant. And there we go. Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon some of the sort of specific details that I found in this game that I feel like can be improved quite well. I feel like it would be really useful. It would be really useful to improve them. I am aiming a little bit off, because for me, I feel like it should be up here, right? Because in my game, it's actually tilted about here compared to this game, which is tilted about there. So when I aim, I'm actually, I would expect that to hit there. I'm just not, that's why I'm always a little bit low, and then I have to correct it here. Oh, there we go. I also don't know where the holster point is, because I'm so used to my own game. But yeah, I have to constantly tilt it up after I've started aiming. I love them effects, right? So your effects are brilliant. I really like them, especially the effects that are going on here. I feel like you're using the new Unity particle system. So here we go. These particle systems, I feel like you're using new particle system from Unity. The new sort of HDRP or URP particle system definitely looks really, really flippin' cool. So there we go. But yeah, you can use your physics head over here to push this out of the way. Try that again. I like messing around with this. There we go. Try and push this out of the way. Oh, there we go. Brilliant. And then it returned. I moved out of the way. But yeah, there we go. Just some pointers, just some things to look into. Maybe will nicely improve the game a little bit. Definitely those hand points and stuff, especially this glitch needs to be fixed, right? It's one of those things that really suddenly makes your game look a little bit tacky as a result. It's just one of those unfortunate things that are left in. And then having the distance grabs kind of work when you're supposed to be grabbing this, doing this instead is very, very annoying, right? It's one of those things. It's a little bit annoying. There's another thing that I found is a little bit annoying as well. Maybe give it a little bit of a timer, which is when you grab the magazine. It's fair enough. It looks really nice to have this little animation of it twisting and stuff. But if you're moving your hand very slightly to this side, it'll auto clip. It'll be very, very, very quickly clip, right? So there we go. It becomes a little bit annoying to grab that and then immediately release, because you might just have and then there's also that, but you might just have grabbed it, pulled a little bit because you're pulling a grip, right? You're pulling a grip, so you could also have that problem. So there is definitely that as a problem, right? But you might just be, oh my god, you might just be grabbing the thing and then pushing forward, and of course the result is that you don't grab it, right? So maybe have a timer or automatically push it forward and then slowly lerp it back a little bit, right? We're talking minimal amount of time, right? We're talking very, very small amount of... I have no idea where the things are on each of these guns, but there we go. Yeah, thanks very much for watching. I hope that has been a little bit of details. I kind of just wanted to address these sort of small things, mainly for the developers. I know that other people will watch the video, but mainly for the developers. Have a look at some of those details, because I think you could definitely make it feel a lot better, especially things like the way the avatar moves. But I assume you're probably using an external avatar handling script or system or whatever like that. That's fine, all good. But really, I think this animation for crouching, definitely replace that maybe for something straightforward, because it feels very, very awkward, and it looks really awkward even from the third-person view, right? So it's not even a personal body thing, it's more than that. But yeah, hand positions, offsets, definitely something to look into. I've never really understood why there would be an offset like that for a hand when it's holding something. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Wow, that was unbelievable. But there we go. Yeah, really nice effects. I love the effects in this game. Very, very nice. But thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you've got a little bit of good stuff going on there from my little video. Hopefully that covers some useful details that you can improve upon. Thanks very much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.